The highly anticipated Nikon Z6 Mark III is here and has some major upgrades from the Mark II and works very well when paired with one of our DL housings. So let's go ahead and walk through an assembly of what one of these systems looks like. Obviously, I'm going to be shooting the Nikon Z6 Mark III. I'll be pairing that camera body with the 12 to 28mm PZ lens, and I have the DL housing for that system here, along with the 8-inch dome port. Now you'll notice that when you look at this housing specifically, I have some accessories pre-installed to suit my shooting needs. Those accessories include the right handle. Because I've added that handle, I'm going to have extensions for both the shutter and back button. Also, I have the USB-C bulkhead. That lets me charge the camera and offload my images without disassembling the system. So you'll see those pre-installed. If you want to take a closer look at how to install those on your system, take a look at the description below. We'll link to videos there. But without further ado, let's go ahead and see how this thing goes together. First things first, on my assembly mat, I just take my housing and sit it down on its face, and you'll notice that there are 3 locking levers. Push up on the lock lets you lift the lever on all 3. That locking lever helps you so that you don't accidentally open the housing it's very intentional to open it. So when you do that and you lift those levers off the hooks of the back, you can simply remove the back, take it and set it aside. Taking a closer look inside the housing, you'll notice that we have a few things going on. Obviously, our control interface that touches the camera directly. Here we have a hot shoe, and you'll notice the lead for my USB-C bulkhead. But notice here in the camera base, we have a camera mount. We're going to remove that, set the housing over here just for a moment. You'll notice here there's an anti-rotation wall on the back of this and a 1/4-20 screw. That's going to correspond to the 1/4-20 mounting point on your camera. So obviously what we're going to do here is make sure that our LCD screen is rotated so that we can see it. And we're going to align that anti-rotation wall with the back and the 1/4-20 screw with the mount on the camera. Using a flat-headed screwdriver, I'm going to make sure it's secure to the camera body. We do want to make sure this is snug, no need to over-tighten. But any movement that occurs between the camera mount and the camera body will translate to a misalignment in controls. So now that that's nice and snug, we can return our attention back to the housing itself. So I'm going to be using the Nikon Z6 Mark III along with the 12 to 28 PZ lens. Now, this particular camera does allow me to utilize the power zoom function of this lens, meaning that I can zoom the lens using the back buttons plus and minus for your magnifying glasses. That also lets me put this lens onto the camera body and then install that assembly into the housing, making it what we call a rear loading system. Now, not all Nikons do this, depending on your firmware or your camera body specifically. If that's the case for you, we will have a section later in the video where there's a mechanical interface to zoom the lens. But first, the starting point, we'll just go ahead and install that because this camera does let me do that. So, like you normally would, attach your Nikon PZ lens to the camera body, making sure you remove the lens cap. You can do that later, but I like to do it now because it wouldn't be the first time that you get in the housing and the lens cap is still attached. Now you'll notice that you have control interfaces, and these controls touch the camera to utilize the push buttons and the dials. I like to go ahead and make sure that everything's kind of out of the way so that when I slide the camera in, there's no interference. Here I have my hot shoe, which I'll pull out of the way as well. And I'm going to go ahead and install that hot shoe onto the top of the camera. And then basically make sure that it's pushed all the way forward and making contact with the pins. And again, I'm using the USB-C bulkhead because I like to offload my images and charge the camera without having to disassemble it. I'm going to open up this side panel here, and it's going to reveal I have a USB-C port here. And that's going to correspond to my USB-C lead. I will align that and plug that in. Make sure it's fully attached. And now that I have my hot shoe and my USB-C lead attached, I can align the camera mount with the camera base in the bottom of the housing, and then just simply let that drop down into place. Now that that's dropped down into place, I'm going to realign the controls make sure everything is going to interface properly. And before we put the back on, I'm going to take an opportunity to visually inspect this sealing surface here, that it's clean and free of debris. Now this is a compression seal for the back, so there's no lubricant required because there's no friction to overcome. While using lubricant won't hurt anything, it does have a tendency to attract debris, which of course is going to compromise our seal. So I generally do not recommend using lubricant for this seal. The flip side of that is the back. You'll notice that there is an O-ring. Again, no lubrication here required, and it always follows an outside curve. So it's never taking an inside curve, and it's a compression seal. So that's clean and free of debris. So you can check the sealing surface in the O-ring and then realign the back to the front. You'll notice there's a pocket for the camera mount, and then lift each of the lid snaps over the hooks of the back, and then simultaneously on the left and right, we're going to push down until you hear them lock into place. Same thing for the top. Now take your time and make sure that each one is locked. And that's as simple as installing the camera body and replacing the back. Now the 12 to 28 PZ lens does not require any DL extension, so all we need is the large 8-inch dome port. So to attach this, I'm going to take the housing on my assembly mat, place it down like that. I'm going to use a little bit of the included Ikelite lube. Not a lot, just a little bit on my finger and thumb. And I'm going to apply that lubricant to this O-ring here. And while I'm applying it to the O-ring, I'm also doing a visual inspection, and I'm feeling for anything that would compromise the seal. Oftentimes you'll feel it before you can see it. So a little bit there. And I'm going to turn my attention to the dome port. Now if we look at the dome port, we have two larger shade sections. One of those shade sections is going to correspond to one of the 3 thumb screws. That will be the top of our housing. So what we're going to do is make sure that all 3 of the thumb screws are backed out so that they're not protruding to the inside diameter. And we're going to check the sealing surface here. Again, running our finger over that surface, both applying a little bit of lubricant and also checking for anything that might affect the seal. And that's clean. And then returning our attention to that thumb screw that corresponds to the top shade, because that's going to be the top of our housing. We're going to align that thumb screw with the top pocket. You'll notice that in the port base of the housing that there are 3 pockets, and those are going to correspond to the 3 thumb screws. So align that top thumb screw with the top of the housing, and then securely push down all the way until it's flush. And then that will allow you to tighten up the 3 thumb screws. You shouldn't feel any resistance, and you don't need to use a tool here. Those 3 thumb screws are going to go into that pocket and act as a retention mechanism. The seal occurred when the 2 pieces were actually pushed together. I'm going to do one more thing, and that's use the optional vacuum pump, and I'm going to create a vacuum inside this housing. This is going to do 2 things. One is it'll make sure that I didn't forget an O-ring, or that an O-ring isn't compromised. And 2 is it provides a mechanical reinforcement to all the closing mechanisms. So let me show you how to do that. You'll notice here on the bottom left-hand side of the housing, there is a vacuum valve, and there is a push button. If you push the push button, it will release the cap, and the cap will come out. When the cap is out, you can insert the barbed tip of the vacuum pump, and you'll hear it click into place. Now you can pump the hand pump. Now I've pumped it to 10 on the gauge. The number that you choose is not as critical as the fact that the needle on the gauge isn't moving. If the needle on the gauge is dropping, that means that you have a differential in pressure and you're losing air's getting back into the housing, and that of course means that it will leak. So what I like to do is I like to choose 10, I pump it to 10, I kind of give it a look for just a few seconds to make sure that the needle is not dropping, and once it's holding steady at 10, I will remove the pump by pushing the button and removing the barb, and I always make sure to put the cap back in. If you were to go diving without the cap in, water will come in through the valve, so that's why I always make sure that when I take one out, I put one back in. And the reason that I don't leave the hand pump attached is if this hand pump was compromised, let's say there was a hair crack in it, I will lose that vacuum through the pump, and of course diagnostically speaking, then I won't know whether or not this had a leak or this had a leak. So what I like to do is leave this for as long as I can. Ideally, I've done this the night before, and this is sitting out and ready to be tested back before I go out in the morning, but if you don't have that kind of time, give yourself 15-20 minutes and then recheck the pressure. And to do that is very simple. We'll just use the pump again, remove the cap from the valve, reinsert the tube, and we will jump right back to where we left off, in this case 10, if everything held. So in this case we did, we're good to go. Again, remove the pump and replace the cap. And you do want to go diving with this under a vacuum. Again, that's going to provide that reinforcement that we're looking for. Let's say you got done diving, everything went well, now you're ready to disassemble your housing. Two things. If you're using a USB-C bulkhead like I am, I'm going to remove this bulkhead cap so I can transfer my images off the camera and charge it. Because that utilizes a circuit board inside, that's not going to be airtight. Therefore, if I do that, I will have to re-vacuum the housing after I do my data transfer. Or if I want to disassemble the housing, I will have to release the vacuum. Keep in mind that if it's under a vacuum, I won't be able to take the port off and I won't be able to take the back off. So releasing the vacuum is simple. You can do it one of two ways. Reinsert the barb into the valve and push the release button on the vacuum pump itself, and that will release the vacuum. Or if you find yourself in a scenario where you don't have access to the hand pump, you can simply release the cap, and you'll notice down in there's a button that you can press using a pen or a pencil, and that'll release the vacuum. So that's as easy as it is to accommodate the Nikon Z6 Mark III and the 12-28p Z lens. If you have any questions about what you saw here, please feel free to shoot us an email to ikelite@ikelite.com.